Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24 111.
Thanks, Pat, and you're welcome back to Tipp Today. 1800 938 007. That's our free phone number. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now, the following segment contains discussions of sexual content and themes that some listeners might find sensitive, so listener discretion is advised, particularly if you have little ears around the house. Now, RTE has removed a link from its website to a Pride-themed reading guide produced by Children's Books Ireland, confirming that the decision was made for age-appropriate reasons. Now, the nature of the book, What's the Tea?, by transgender author Juno Dawson, was brought to light after Gript reporter Ben Scallan asked Children's Minister Norma Foley if she thought it was appropriate. And of course there was a whole load of controversy around that. But Sandra Adams is an advocate for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding and fact-based education, and has been following the story and joins me now. Sandra, good morning to you.
Good morning, Fran.
And it's good to talk to you again, and thank you for coming on with us today. Would you just give us an overview of the controversy and how this came to light, Sandra?
Yeah, I think you've summarised it very well there. Norma Foley was asked a question about whether she thought this book, What's the Tea?, was appropriate to include in the Pride reading guide. And she said she had no knowledge of the book, and Ben Scallan said, well, I sent it to your department. I told them I was going to ask you this question. And then subsequently, former Minister for Justice, Charlie Flanagan, has stated that he gave the minister these books in December 2023. And he said, and I quote, he said, Norma Foley can't say she doesn't know about fisting and rimming and more in school books. She does, because I told her personally. And he said that he gave her the books in Leinster House. He discussed it with her in Leinster House, and that she almost ran away from him laughing. He was very surprised by her reaction. And it is quite worrying that she's saying she doesn't know about the books when a senior minister brought them to her attention 3 years ago. It's also deeply worrying that Children's Books Ireland don't seem to have learned their lesson, because in 2023 they had to remove another book by the same author called This Book is Gay because of similar concerns about the content in the book. So it seems that we're playing whack-a-mole. It doesn't matter how many times parents or advocates for child safeguarding say they object to certain content and the age appropriateness of it. The people who are promoting the books don't seem to be learning.
I read the book over the weekend, and aspects of it I certainly was rather shocked by. Would you talk us through some of the content of this? Now, I've already given out that just discretion advised for people, and just to repeat that again because of what we're talking about. I mean, the nature, 2 chapters in particular, very graphic.
Yeah, well, I suppose the focus has been on the chapter Sexy Fun Time.
Yeah.
I think even the way it's presented, it's very childish language. And we should, be aware that this book is recommended from 15 years up. Now, the age of consent in Ireland is 17. The book is written and published by a UK publishing house where the age of consent is 16. So there's a difference there. Nonetheless, as adults, we are responsible for children who are minors. Now, Sexy Fun Times talks about how a young person or someone reading the book can prepare themselves to have anal sex.
Yes.
And how to clean themselves up after having anal sex. And there's scant regard for intimacy or relationships within the book. And in addition to the quite graphic content about sex acts, I would be very concerned that the book presents anybody who queries why a child might be having identity issues, that child needs to be worried about people hating them that anyone who queries them hates them. And that's a dreadful message to give vulnerable children. It also just bypasses transition. At one point he says, so what if you get it wrong? With no consideration of the profound physical and psychological impacts that transition has. And just for your audience, transition means taking chemical or surgical measures to alter your body so that you're trying to resemble a member of the opposite sex. And for girls, that means the amputation of healthy breasts. For boys, it means the removal of the penis and the testes. It also includes the use of medication. And he says at one point, puberty blockers are a pause button. And if you don't like it or you change your mind, you just press play again. I mean, that's simply wrong.
Yeah, I thought that when he was talking about the idea of if you get it wrong, so what? I thought he was talking about how you identify yourself more than the more extreme aspect of this. Did I get that wrong, Sandra?
Yeah, I think I've listened to the book again over the weekend, and there isn't a serious consideration of, like, surgery is not reversible. And I think it's disingenuous. He doesn't talk in a serious way about what the impact is of surgery, and definitely is not truthful about the impact of puberty blockers. It is not a pause. You cannot press play. Once puberty starts, you have to let it work all the way through. And I think at one point he says he went through the wrong puberty. You don't go through the wrong puberty. You just go through puberty. And he was implying that because he felt he was misidentified as a boy when he was born, that he went through a male puberty when he should have gone through a female puberty. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
Is there any excuse around this? And I'm taking into account the graphic nature of some aspects of the book. Is there any excuse that it is sort of almost comic book-like in some stage in terms of how it's laid out? So it's simplistic for the age bracket that it's aimed at. Now, I'm playing devil's advocate here on this.
Yeah.
So what about that, Sandra?
Well, I think you have to take into consideration what's age and developmentally appropriate. So, for parents, I think this is one of the issues. That these are conversations that probably are best had with parents, rather than we used to be able to trust institutions to make the right decisions, and it's increasingly looking like we can't, because an ideological position is being taken. And so even though you could say that the book some information has to be presented in a way that's not frightening or scary, but the information also has to be appropriate for the age of the child. And in his previous book, This Book is Gay, he recommended that young people go on dating apps and organise hookups for casual sex. Now, that's just dangerous and deeply inappropriate. So I understand what you're saying, that sometimes you have to present information in a way that is accessible to a child, but the information also has to be appropriate for the child.
And can I put something else to you on that? And again, I say this with deep regret, but by the time a youngster gets to the age of 15, in the world of social media and all of that, and their access to, extreme pornography and are they not in a place where this probably wouldn't surprise them all that much, Sandra?
Well, possibly, but I think we can take the position that, well, they're seeing it anyway, and so we can't try to protect them. It's our role as adults to safeguard, and I think that we have an issue here where it's almost become unfashionable to say some things are normal and appropriate and some things are not normal and inappropriate. And when you're responsible for safeguarding and well-being, you have to be able to tell the difference. If you can't, you're in the wrong job. And you also have to be fearless in that you're not afraid of being called a prude or old-fashioned. because your job is to protect children, and it doesn't matter what other people say about you. And if you're worried about that, then this isn't the role for you.
What did you make of some of the conversation around the idea of trans being dysmorphia, dysphoria, or that type of thing? So from I suppose the medical aspect of how it might be viewed in psychiatry and the like. What did you think of when it touched on that?
Well, I think it's kind of it's complex, because I know, like, on the one hand, gender dysphoria is presented as if it is not a mental health issue. But then, if it's not a mental health issue, what is it? And why does something that isn't a health issue require surgery or medication to deal with it? It's completely illogical. And I think the fact, I mean, the book was written in 2019, I believe, but it hasn't been updated to address anything like the CAS review, yes, which was very, very clear about how careful we have to be with young people who are in this distress, where they are deeply uncomfortable with their sex body. And I think it's interesting, in the book, you asked about other things that concerned me. It did come across to me that Juno Dawson is a gay man, and when he wrote this book as gay, he wrote it as a gay man. And somewhere along the way, he has convinced himself, or become convinced, that he is a woman. But there were references to how he wasn't accepted as an effeminate boy. And there was a very dark joke in the the Tavistock Clinic, which, was the subject of the CAS review. It's the biggest gender clinic in the UK. And the clinicians there said, at the rate we're going, there'll be no gay children left, because the transitioning is a way, if you live in a homophobic society, of getting the effeminate gay boy or the butch lesbian out of view, because you effectively turn them into what looks like heterosexual people. You turn the butch lesbian into a gay boy, and you turn the effeminate boy into a girl. It's profoundly homophobic. I thought that was something that struck me in the book.
Where Children's Books Ireland is concerned, and I spoke to Peadar Tobin, the leader of Intu, earlier on, and he's going so far as to say that the organisation should be brought before an Oireachtas committee to explain themselves. Would you go along with that?
I think I would, because they get state funding, and they've just they've sought €68 million to increase access to books in libraries and in schools. Now, they're not seeking specifically to distribute this reading list, but if that organisation doesn't see what the issue might be with the content of books that it promotes and the ages it's promoting them to, I would be very concerned about the influence that they might have on what books are chosen for promotion in schools and in libraries.
No, their reason for existing, it's important to point out, is a very fine one indeed, because they're dedicated, I understand, to the fostering of a love of reading in children and young people, which is to be commended. I'm sure you would agree, mm-hmm. Sandra.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be fair to say that otherwise, they do good work. But the fact that they got this so wrong twice, the same reading list in 2023 was the subject of controversy. It was the same author, and again in 26, the same reading list and the same author. And they when they took the book, This Book is Gay, off the list in 2023, the HSE also took the book off their recommended reading list, because it was on their reading list as in a toolkit to be used by teachers teaching SPHE. So they obviously have influence, And this is back to the chain of trust. You know, we should be able to trust that the organisation that promotes literacy and promotes a love of reading is choosing books that are appropriate for our children. But when that trust breaks down, it's very difficult then to be comfortable about what influence they might have on 68 million euros worth of books being distributed across schools and libraries.
There was almost a dismissal of any issue around biological men being in women's places, women's bathrooms, for example. Mm-hmm. That was sort of pushed aside as being a relevant issue.
Yeah, well, I think this comes back to this thing. He says it in the book as well, that trans people...
Sorry, just to add, you know that Juno Dawson this time would look at himself as a transgender woman, so she, I believe,
yes.
is what...
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Juno Dawson says in the book that trans people are denied their human rights. And I mean, that's just not true. They're human and they have the same rights as everybody else. What he's talking about is the conflict between the additional rights that are being sought by trans and non-binary people and how they conflict with the rights of mainly women and children. And so this idea that a man who identifies a woman has the right to use a female-only space. If you permit that, that means that single-sex provision for women is gone. As soon as a man enters a space that was once only for women, it is no longer a woman-only space, regardless of how that man identifies or whether or not he has a piece of paper from the state that says he is now a woman. He was born male. He will always be male. He can think about himself as he wishes. He should not be discriminated against for that. He should not be ridiculed for that. But we have to accept that the only person who can be a trans woman is someone who was born male and will always be a man. And this is the conflict. So when people talk about kind of the issue around men coming into women's spaces, and the lack of rights of trans people, what they're actually talking about is wanting more rights than other people, women, and that those rights of women are less important than the feelings of the man who wants to enter the woman's space or compete against her in sport.
Where does RTE fit in to this in terms of their culpability, if I can use that word? What do you think about RTE in this?
Well, I think, so let's be honest, media organisations receive press releases all the time. And, you know, journalism is being kind of eroded. There isn't the same amount of people to check things out. And I think sometimes RTE seems to just print a press release as if it's news. It's just regurgitating what people are giving it. I think they knew, or they should. I'm
sure they would disagree with you profoundly on that. Well,
I'd love to go on and discuss that with them. But the link to this reading list, it was also on Kids RTE, so it's being promoted within the kids section of RTE. And the fact that they took the link out of the story tells you that, well, at least they took it seriously. But they would have been aware that CBI had the same issue 3 years ago. And nobody thought to go through the list and have a look and see if, you know, Juno Dawson was still there and maybe ask questions and go and have a look at it. And I think RTE are very, very reluctant to address any issue around sex and gender since the Liveline issue in 2022 when Joe Duffy had women on for 3 days talking about why we need single-sex spaces, why the conflict of rights has to be addressed, and women have to be favoured because we're entitled to same-sex provision. And that caused huge controversy. There was a threat to bring RTE before an Oireachtas committee because they dared give women an opportunity to say, we think we deserve spaces where men are not present when we are in a state of undress or are vulnerable, or in sport. And the Oireachtas and politicians were outraged by that, but don't seem to be outraged by the fact that inappropriate material could be presented to children in such a casual manner. It's really quite remarkable. So I don't really have much faith in RTE addressing anything to do with sex and gender in a fair manner, I have to be honest.
Sandra, we appreciate your time today, and thank you very much indeed for coming on with us. Thank you. Good morning to you.
Fran.
Bye-bye to you now. That's Sandra Adams there, and Sandra is an advocate for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding and fact-based education. 1800 938 007. The text and WhatsApp is 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.